On the last morning of 2010, in Wilmington, Delaware, workers at a landfill made a shocking discovery. Among the piles of trash lay the body of a man. Not just any man. This was John Jack Wheeler III. He wasn't a stranger or someone unknown to the world. He was a former White House insider, a man who had worked with presidents, generals, and lawmakers. So how does someone like Jack, a man with power, respect, and a long career of service, end up in a garbage dump? Who wanted him gone, and why was his life thrown away like trash? This is the haunting mystery we're about to uncover. But before we dive in, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who love true crime and unsolved mysteries. It helps us keep telling stories like this one. John Jack Wheeler wasn't just another name in the crowd. He was a man who had lived a life of service. Jack worked under 3 U.S. presidents, held high positions in the Pentagon, and advised the Secretary of the Air Force. He was smart, respected, and well-connected in Washington. But beyond politics, Jack left a lasting mark on the nation. He helped create the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, a place where families still go to honor their loved ones. He was a man who gave so much. That's why his death feels so unthinkable. Jack's life was split between 2 very different places. In Harlem, New York, he and his wife Catherine lived in a busy city neighborhood. There they could blend in with the crowd and enjoy the culture of the city. But in Newcastle, Delaware, they had a quieter home. It was a small town filled with history, where life moved at a slower pace. Jack moved between these 2 worlds often, one public and fast, the other private and calm. It showed how complex he was, living with both prestige and privacy. Christmas Day in 2010 seemed simple and warm for Jack Wheeler and his wife Catherine. They spent the holiday in Harlem with family, surrounded by the comfort of loved ones. There were no signs of trouble, no warning that anything was about to change. It was the kind of day many families share: food, conversation, and the feeling of togetherness. For Jack, it was just another holiday at home. No one could have guessed that within days he would vanish and his life would take a tragic turn. On the morning of December 28th, Jack left New York and caught a train heading to Washington, D.C. It was nothing unusual for him. He often traveled for work. Jack was working with a defense company called Miter Corp, and throughout the day he sent emails from his phone like normal. Everything about his routine looked steady and professional. To anyone watching, it was just another business trip. No one around him could have guessed that this train ride was the start of his final days.
Late that night, in Newcastle, Delaware, a neighbor was startled by strange noises outside. When he looked out, he saw the shadow of a man moving near a house that was still under construction. Moments later, smoke began to rise from the site. Fire crews rushed over and found that someone had tossed smoke bombs inside. The only thing left behind was a cell phone, and it belonged to Jack Wheeler. Could the shadowy figure have been Jack himself, caught in a moment no one could explain? The neighbor wasn't sure what he had just witnessed. The figure was too far away to identify, only a dark outline against the night. But the timing was strange. Jack had been fighting against that very construction project, saying the new house would ruin the historic feel of the neighborhood. Was he there to make a point, or had someone else staged the scene to point fingers at him? The smoke, the cell phone, the mystery figure, it all left more questions than answers. When firefighters entered the half-built home, they quickly saw that it wasn't a real fire. Instead, someone had set off smoke bombs inside. The damage was minor, but the act was strange and deliberate. Then came the most shocking detail. Police found a cell phone left behind at the scene. It belonged to Jack Wheeler. Why was his phone there? Had he dropped it by accident, or had someone planted it to link him to the smoke bombs? The mystery deepened with every clue. Jack had strong feelings about the new house being built across the street from his own. He believed the construction would harm the historic look of the neighborhood, and he had spoken out against it. Some thought this gave him a reason to act, maybe even to send a message. But was Jack really the kind of man to sneak out at night and toss smoke bombs? Or was someone using his opposition as a cover to frame him? The line between protest and crime suddenly became very blurry. The next morning, December 29th, Jack sent an email to his workplace, Miter Corp. In it, he explained that his home in Delaware had been broken into. Several important things were missing: his cell phone, his work badge, his key fob, and his briefcase. These weren't small losses. They were personal and professional items, things tied to both his identity and his job. The burglary added another strange twist. Was it connected to the smoke bomb incident, or was Jack caught up in something far more serious? As the hours passed, Jack's behavior started to worry those who saw him. He seemed restless and unsettled, not the steady man people knew. Jack had a history of bipolar disorder, and some began to wonder if this explained what was happening. Was he going through an episode that left him confused and vulnerable? Or was there another force at work, something pushing him into chaos? His missing items, his strange movements, and his troubled state painted a picture that didn't make sense. That evening, Jack walked into a small pharmacy near his home in New Castle. He didn't look like himself. Tired, uneasy, and a bit lost, he went up to the pharmacist with a strange request. He asked for a ride to Wilmington. The pharmacist was surprised and offered to call him a cab instead. But Jack refused. For a man who had spent years navigating Washington power circles, it was odd. Why would someone so capable turn down simple help and seem so out of place? About 40 minutes after leaving the pharmacy, Jack turned up in a parking garage in Wilmington. Security cameras showed him moving around, clearly unsettled. He told the attendant on duty that his briefcase had been stolen and that he couldn't find his car. The man looked confused, almost lost in his own thoughts. For someone so sharp and organized in his career, this was alarming. Jack seemed like he was slipping further into trouble, and no one around him understood why. The next morning, December 30th, Jack's neighbor, Robert Dill, noticed something strange. A window at Jack's home in New Castle was wide open. Curious and worried, he stepped inside to check. What he found was troubling. Chairs knocked over, dishes broken in the sink, and a plant tipped onto the floor. The house looked like it had been ransacked. To Robert, it was clear someone had broken in. But where was Jack? And why did his home look like a scene of chaos and struggle? Robert Dill didn't waste time. After seeing the state of Jack's home, he picked up the phone and called both Jack and his wife, Catherine. He left voicemails, hoping someone would respond quickly, but no one did. At the same time, Catherine and their daughters were also trying to reach Jack. They called again and again, only to be met with silence. For Jack, this was very unusual. He was a man who always stayed in touch. The silence now felt heavy, and it set off alarms for everyone who knew him. Later that same day, Jack appeared at the Wheeler'S office building in Wilmington. He walked in and asked to speak with someone from a law firm located inside. But before any meeting could happen, Jack suddenly turned and left. No clear reason, no explanation. People who saw him said he seemed restless, as if something was weighing heavily on his mind. For a man once so steady in high-pressure roles, his behavior was out of place. It was another strange turn in a series of confusing events. Surveillance cameras in the Wheeler'S building caught Jack one last time that day. The footage showed him leaving through a basement exit and walking toward Rodney Square. Instead of heading somewhere safe or familiar, Jack drifted into an area known for crime and trouble. For friends and family who later watched the footage, it was painful to see. Why was he wandering alone, looking lost in such a dangerous part of town? Each step seemed to pull him deeper into mystery and danger. That basement camera clip became the final confirmed sighting of Jack Wheeler. After that, he seemed to vanish. No more phone calls, no more sightings, nothing. For investigators, the footage felt haunting. Jack walking alone, looking troubled, and then gone. For his family, it was even harder. They couldn't understand how a man so connected, so capable, could disappear in plain sight. That brief moment on tape was all anyone had left to piece together the final hours of his life. On the morning of December 31st, as most people prepared to welcome the new year, workers at the Cherry Island Landfill made a grim discovery. A garbage truck emptied its load, and among the trash, a body appeared. Shocked, the workers called the police right away. It didn't take long before the truth came out. The body was Jack Wheeler. A man who once moved with power and respect had been found in the most degrading place imaginable, discarded like refuse. When police arrived at the landfill, they worked quickly to confirm the victim's identity. The news spread fast, and it stunned everyone. The man found among piles of garbage was John Jack Wheeler. This wasn't just any man. He had been a respected veteran, a government advisor, someone who had walked the halls of power in Washington. Now, his life had ended in a way that felt unthinkable. To friends, neighbors, and colleagues, the contrast was unbearable. A man of influence discovered in the trash. Investigators quickly turned their focus to the garbage truck that had carried Jack's body. By checking its route, they learned the truck had been making pickups in Newark, Delaware. This detail was strange, since Jack was last seen alive in Wilmington, miles away. How had his body traveled such a distance, and who had placed him in the trash? The truck's path gave police a starting point, but it also deepened the mystery. Jack's final movements no longer added up, leaving more questions than answers. When police looked closer at Jack's body, they ruled out a simple robbery. His watch was still on his wrist, his West Point ring was untouched, and cash remained in his pocket. Whoever hurt him hadn't taken his valuables, but the injuries told another story. Jack had been beaten. The lack of theft made the case more puzzling. If it wasn't about money, then what was the motive? The question hung in the air, and no clear answer seemed to fit. News of Jack Wheeler's death spread quickly, and the reaction was immediate. Headlines questioned how a man of his stature could end up discarded in trash. Colleagues from Washington expressed shock, while veterans who served with him voiced sorrow and anger. Jack had devoted his life to public service, yet his final moments seemed stripped of all dignity. The media demanded answers, and the public wanted justice. The outrage grew louder with each report, but the mystery around his death only deepened. For his wife, Catherine, and their daughters, the pain was almost too much to bear. They remembered the endless calls they had made, the messages left on his phone, and the silence that followed. Now they knew why he never answered. Every unanswered ring replayed in their minds like a cruel echo. The man they loved was gone, and the way he had been found made the loss even heavier. Their grief mixed with confusion, leaving them desperate for answers. As the shock settled, theories began to swirl. Some believed Jack had been robbed, though his valuables were still with him. Others pointed to his history of bipolar disorder, suggesting he may have fallen into confusion and danger on his own. But there was another darker idea, that Jack had been targeted because of his high-level work in government and defense. Each theory carried weight, yet none provided a full answer. the truth seemed hidden, leaving investigators and the public chasing shadows. Attention soon shifted back to Jack's home in Newcastle. The break-in there seemed tied to everything that followed. Chairs overturned, dishes broken, and plants knocked down painted a picture of chaos. Yet the items taken were strange. His work badge, his briefcase, his key fob. Whoever entered wasn't looking for jewelry or cash. They wanted things connected to Jack's identity and his work. The burglary raised chilling questions. Who had targeted him? And what were they really after in his home that night? One detail stood out above the rest: Jack's briefcase. It was never found. For a man like Jack, that bag could have carried more than personal papers. It might have held notes from his work with Mitre, or even sensitive government documents. The fact that it vanished without a trace made the mystery even heavier. Was the break-in meant to get that briefcase and nothing else? And if so, what secrets might have been hidden inside it that were worth stealing? Jack's career only made the missing briefcase more alarming. He wasn't just any consultant. He had worked on defense contracts, cybersecurity issues, and even high-level government policy. His work touched areas where secrets could change the balance of power. If his briefcase held files or notes from those projects, it might explain why someone wanted it so badly. The thought lingered. Did Jack know something dangerous? Something others wanted to keep hidden? His death now seemed less random and more like a warning. Jack was never one to stay quiet when he believed in something. Friends said he could be sharp, even combative, in debates about policy and politics. Over the years, he clashed with colleagues and pushed hard against decisions he thought were wrong. That outspokenness earned him respect, but it also created enemies. In Washington, powerful people don't forget grudges. Could Jack have crossed the wrong person? Someone willing to silence him? The idea was chilling, yet it couldn't be ruled out. As investigators searched for answers, some pointed to Jack's history of bipolar disorder. They suggested his erratic movements, the pharmacy visit, the parking garage, the aimless wandering, might have been signs of an episode. It was an easy explanation, one that seemed to fit the chaos. But others pushed back. Was this a fair look at the facts, or just a way to dismiss deeper questions? Blaming his illness felt too simple. It explained his behavior maybe, but not his death. Long before the chaos of his final days, Jack had built a legacy of service. One of his proudest roles was helping shape the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. He fought to make sure the design honored soldiers with dignity and respect. For Jack, it wasn't just about history. It was about giving voice to those who had sacrificed everything. That fight showed the kind of man he was: determined, passionate, and unwilling to let others be forgotten. Remembering that makes his own end even harder to accept. The hardest part for many was the cruel irony of Jack's death. He had spent years making sure fallen soldiers were remembered with honor, fighting so their names would never be cast aside. Yet in the end, he was found in a landfill, treated like refuse. The symbolism was painful and impossible to ignore. A man who dedicated himself to respect and remembrance had been denied both. For his family, friends, and the public, that bitter contrast made his loss even heavier. Even now, the questions linger. Why was Jack in one of Wilmington's most dangerous areas on the night he vanished? Who attacked him and why? Was his death the result of a random act, or was it carefully planned? And how did his body end up in trash, miles from where he was last seen? Every clue raises another mystery, and none of the answers fit neatly together. What happened to Jack Wheeler remains a puzzle that refuses to be solved. For Jack's family, the pain was not just in losing him, but in how it happened. Catherine spoke out, calling for justice and answers, refusing to let her husband's memory fade into silence. His daughters struggled with the image of their father's final moments, violent, humiliating, and undeserved. They wanted the truth, not theories or guesses. For them, Jack was more than a mystery in the news. He was a husband, a father, and a man whose story deserved an ending with dignity. Over the years, theories have swirled but never settled. Some say Jack was the victim of a random robbery gone wrong. Others point to his bipolar disorder, suggesting his final days were the result of a spiral he couldn't escape. And then there are the darker whispers, that his death was tied to his classified work, a covert assassination hidden in plain sight. Each theory has holes, yet none can be dismissed. The truth sits just out of reach, and the case remains open-ended. In the end, Jack Wheeler's life feels reduced to a haunting mystery. Here was a man who helped shape how America remembers its fallen, a man whose work touched history itself. Yet his own story ends in shadows, questions, and silence. No one has solved the riddle of his death. Was it chance, illness, or something darker? The chilling truth is that a man who fought so hard for memory has himself become an unsolved case, remembered not for answers, but for the questions he left behind.